Okay, so I'll just kind of skip the formalities. You guys are all seasoned vets. So, yay for 2019. So we're still alive. I know we took the break for holiday stuff, which was good. And we'll probably do that this year too, around Christmas time, because I think where it falls is disrespectful to families and stuff. But I think December will be the only month this year that we won't meet. The one bit of change too, so we're shifting to Tuesday. That actually seemed like I set up the survey. Some of you guys may have taken it. It looked like that was kind of a not unanimous, but everybody said Tuesdays actually work really well. So that works great for my schedule too with the newborn. So we'll switch to Tuesday, but I'll post everything ahead of time. Let me go ahead and just dive through. Yeah. So before this is something new that we're gonna start doing too. So each meetup, I want to try to present a challenging question and see what everybody thinks. So the question for today is, if you could predict the future, what does development look like in respect to using game engines and game technology? So I'll go first with my idea. I think what the future looks like in terms of game technology being used is a monumental shift right now in the films industry in being able to actually use real-time rendering for scenes, not only for like stunt viz, pre-viz, but also for actual production with minimal post. So you're talking iteration times from pre-rendered scenes that would take 2 weeks to 2 hours. So that to me is one of my predictions for the future of what it looks like.
Do you have any experience in that? I don't know a lot about the film, but it seems like on set it's expensive. The actors, all the equipment. If they can just do stuff in the studio later, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And so anything that you're talking about doing stuff live and not have to do it later, it seems like later is usually cheaper.
Yeah.
It's like we get stuff we have to do live and then we fix everything else in post.
Yep. Did you guys see Mad Max?
Yeah.
So one of where this my thought came with this one is they didn't do it for production, but it's called stunt viz. And what they do is they test out before the stunt actors go, okay, how dangerous is going to be? How, like if it looks really crappy on, like, we have to go slow enough so they don't break a leg. They do all the testing. They recreated the stunt viz for the scene where the main truck's going through the desert, and the guys on like the pole arms that are doing this. They redid the stunt viz in Unreal, and the guys they spent like 2 days making the whole thing. But they go, the cost for us to do this pre-viz versus all the planning we did traditionally, and then testing how does this pole work and all that one, they said that was a game changer for them.
The other thing is probably some hybrid. They can do stuff in the computer, but they have to blend it with the live, and they don't know how well that's going to be. So
Exactly.
So you can kind of capture the actual live and then see how that would work with a real quick rendering. You go, okay, we want to do some prettier.
Well, even like just camera placement, like, oh, let me move the virtual camera. Oh, hey, we're going to need a boom crane on the back of a truck for this one because we need it 15 feet in the air. Yeah.
They now, these like movies without knowing what they had on film. Now they can have the video camera in the film, so they can watch the video to see what's on film.
Yep.
And if that screws up, they do it again. So if you can do the special effects in real time to see, parts of it and go, yeah, that works with our live action. We don't have to do this again. So, so I'm glad you did it too.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Okay, so what else? Somebody, like I said, this is open discussion. What are some of your guys' thoughts?
I think you're well, I know that they are for like Star Wars to Disney.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen where they're doing that now. So you're flying inside of big screens going. It's all real time. So as you change, changing it there, it's real time as you're flying.
Yeah. Well, especially too when they did the ray tracing demo at GDC. That was before the RTX cards came out with real-time ray tracing, and now you've got real-time ray tracing on graphics cards. And think about doing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And it's just going to lower the cost because we talked, with the Mad Max, with the setting up and everything like that.
Yeah.
2 days, and then you can render it real time. So even near real time. So they can shoot the scene, wait 10 minutes. Here's what it looks like. Direction to the side, then shoot.
Yeah.
Well, one of the questions I would have is, what is this going to impact on independent game development? Because if, in fact, be able to do all this realistic stuff and all of that. I mean, clearly the technical expertise and the equipment required is going to be fairly substantial. So you can, I think, to a point where it's going to be harder and harder for indie games to compete with the big studios.
I think that. Well, I think the big advantage that you can't replicate with technology is the artistry and the story. And that's one thing that I think indies have a beautiful place with, because in bigger contexts of like AAA stuff, they are way more inclined to do what is sellable, i.e. Call of Duty. People buy it, we know they buy it. They're not going to be, progressive in a story. I think though, if I had one prediction for the future, I think in the future we're going to see more tools like what like Substance Painter is and stuff, where the creation process, whether it's scripting things in game or creating content faster, I think that's going to start taking kind of a rejuvenated. It's going to get a whole new rejuvenation with indies in particular. Is my thought.
I agree with you. One word: the power of love.
Yeah.
I say that
Yeah.
because that's the one thing right now that's a pain in our butts in creating anything on our computers is that we are dealing with a two-dimensional interface trying to make a three-dimensional world. And we've got all these neat movies where they have the imaginary holographic displays, and you get to, ooh, I'm moving this thing here. That's what's going to happen. That's what we have to do next. That's going to open up the ability where we can effectively, physically manipulate these worlds that we create.
Yeah.
So you can be designing in a VR set.
Effectively.
They've actually kind of tried that one too with ZBrush has it, but they've got a couple other programs like with the Oculus, and it's interesting. But yeah, there's a weird you can do it faster with mouse, but then it's like slow, but then it takes back off. So.
Talk about technology being too expensive for the indie. It always starts that way. There's some new technology that's way too expensive. Only the biggest players have access to it, and then it gets cheaper.
Yeah.
More people develop whatever hardware and software. The stuff that we're doing real cheap with games now was only for the movie studios.
Right.
They could buy, Jurassic Park with Silicon Graphics server farms. Now you can do that stuff pretty cheap.
Well, you think about it too, like
it's
what?
expensive, and then eventually the indies have access to the tools that used to be thousands of dollars. Now there's a free version.
Yeah. Well, you think about it too, like so
Many
I
years.
had it in the note too, but like when Epic just acquired a couple other tools like AI tools, and why am I going blank on it? They did a huge big studio. They're based in Prague. I have it written down, but that's a situation where the tools are free through Unreal, and they start integrating in those. So that's a rare exception with you're getting more tools for free. But yeah.
Like we're a little bit like with Unity going with the subscription only. So I know they had talked about that with Unreal. But I think Fortnite kind of helped us save on card. They're making so much money for that, they don't have to charge.
Yeah. Well, so they still do licensing stuff over a certain. Once you make, I think, over $100,000, it's 5%. But it's not like you have to pay before your sales. You pay after your sales, which is extremely
It's always a
helpful.
percentage of your sales, but
I saw this Unreal Engine. I think back in 2006. I was trying to get back into games, and and there were these engines, but whatever the price was, it was just like
$19.99 for Unreal Engine a month.
yeah, it's like I can't do that. I'm not a big Sony whatever game studio, so it's like it's not a possibility. And then a couple years ago, the licensing changed. It's like what? I just have to pay this fairly small percentage, and I get all this.
Yeah.
It's like oh wow, I was kind of recreating all these things in a game engine individually as I need it for a game.
And
it's
now
like,
it's there.
It's like even the physics engine is physics. That didn't exist. Anything that was any good was not free.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Buy a license for this. Buy a license for
there's a
that.
good
You want that
physics
plugin? Buy a
engine,
plugin for that.
and it's like a lot of money, because it evolved from scientific use or something,
Mhm.
And it's like, I'll just write some of my own stuff. It won't be as good, but and so the stuff that's there now, it's like, wow, where was this 10 years ago when I really could have used it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like everybody tries to predict the next big breakthrough in technology, and they always get it wrong.
Yeah.
Every company says, we have the next greatest thing. And it's not.
Yeah.
It's something nobody ever expected. It always happens. The biggest thing is always something nobody saw coming.
Yeah.
But you try to predict anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so one more if anybody's got a thought. So we've already kind of covered film and stuff. What do you think?
I just feel like there's going to be more utilization of AI and try and make it stuff out quicker. I mean, that's what they did in Far Cry 5. They used that for their environment, they set parameters, and they let the AI place where certain assets went. So.
I don't know if you guys saw the article posted, but NVIDIA ran, I think it was Zelda Link's Adventure or something like that, PC one, but they let the AI run the game from the texture standpoint. They said, the AI was looking at different games and said, okay, what do high quality like AAA textures look like? And it went and it resourced all the textures and it made it like graphical quality. Wow, that's incredible. So it was able to retexture the whole game based off of AI, which had huge implications in terms of like, that would be crazy 10 years from now if you type, what kind of game do you want? Oh, open world, third person, RPG with semi-stylized. There it is.
It's
Like,
crazy for retro games. Well, not so much retro games, but everything's jumping so far forward every couple of years.
Mhm.
If you want to play, the game you played back in college with your friends, you just drop it into like this program and basically spits out like a AAA game for that year.
right.
It'd be crazy.
Yeah, that's probably far-fetched, but in a sad way, I'm thinking maybe it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, they're redoing all the games now between Spyro, Crash,
Mhm.
Resident Evil 2. Like, they're just going back. There's that make a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
just almost remove the human part from it and just be like, $5 and you get your entire game library updated or something like that. It'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
Crazy. Which probably goes back to the whole point too of further reinforcing the need for indies to break away from the mainstream. Oh, these are all auto-generated and they kind of feel plasticky, they feel fake, and then you create some of the cool
When you talk about
stories.
scripts, Armageddon, these movies with the great special effects,
Mhm.
they had scripts. I like an intelligent story, not just.
Yeah.
Special
This
effects are
game was
cool.
brought to you by Google Translate.
But the movie companies, they want to go with established franchise. They know what the music, the movies, the stories that sell. It's the
Mhm.
indies that create original music and
Yeah.
films. It's just more risky, and the big companies just want to go with what makes money, the most
Exactly.
money, the quickest.
Yeah.
So,
Free Willy 4. Oh, is right.
how many Sharknadoes have there been now?
Yeah, right.
I never even saw it, so I just.
Yeah.
I try to come up with games that aren't like everything else, another simulator, another adventure game. But it's
Yeah.
hard to be creative to get something that's different and good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different's easy, it's more difficult.
Right.
Here it comes back to that prototype. If you could just say, what is it about my game that makes it unique, and just program that part of it and let the computer fill in the gaps. That's effectively what the AI is supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. So, cool. Okay, so we'll keep moving on. So I just was going to highlight briefly, real quick, the Meetup survey. So as I said before, too, 2019, hopefully going to be the same stuff you love, but better with the Meetup. And so the survey was great. For those of you guys that did fill it out, thank you. That helps out a ton. I thought this was pretty interesting. I won't share the whole survey, just a couple highlight ones.
Actually, I like statistics, so anything that, I know where I am, it's like, other people, I have no idea.
Yeah. So about half the group was kind of mid-level hobbyists. So you guys obviously know what you're doing in the engine, but probably some of the deeper things, definitely things that we'll try to cover as well. A couple advanced professionals, no experts apparently. I didn't take the survey. Just kidding. And then a few beginners as well. So I thought it was kind of crazy that it was actually a 50, 25, 25 split. So, and then the next thing, this is I think the only other stat that I have in here, which was, I threw out in the survey some various aspects of areas where game technology could be used, from like ArchViz commercial stuff to traditional games. And in general, this did not come out well when I copy pasted this. But in general, this area right here is game development. So there was a lot of interest in making games. I'm still working on a couple ideas for this, but obviously making a game is very, very complicated, very complex. But I think that from my experience in the game dev world, there are certain aspects that I think trip up people a lot, i.e., how do you package? How do you get the idea in to deploy it? How do you performance profile? How do you find things that aren't working? You know, those kind of things as well. So those are things that we're going to try to cover as well in the meetup. So things that will help you ship faster, get things out the door, or figure out what's happening behind the scenes. A couple other things in there. I think the intellectual property rights was good. I'm gonna see if I can secure this, but I've got an intellectual property lawyer that we use for our studio, and I'm hoping that what I can do is try to get him in for kind of a guest talk for free, fingers crossed. But really kind of cover some of the things, the CYA clauses. So you have an idea, how do you protect it? You've got an idea, but you want to hire people. You're outsourcing, how do you protect all your stuff? So bring that in for a guest speaker. Cool. Okay, so the
That's
first
relevant with all kinds of engineering, whether it's games or just electronic products, It's,
right.
And I've been trying to learn more about that too,
Yeah.
And I work with people with the idea, and I'm a contractor for them doing software, and non-disclosure agreement part of it. But then there's way more to go on both sides.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so the next thing I want to step through is just some general resources. I'm sure you guys know some of these, but I think it's just kind of good to highlight. Of course, UnrealEngine.com. Their news feed is pretty good. They're actually pumping out a lot more articles and stuff. There's a couple that I've got later that I'll bring up to the show that are kind of good, but they're less. What they're actually starting to do now is more relevant knowledge for developers, i.e., like, what were some of the pitfalls that this studio had in getting things out? So that's super, super nice. The docs, you guys all know the Unreal docs, right? Put it here. Okay, so they've really been adding a ton more things to this. I know that, I want to say, let me see if I can, I'm probably picking a bad example on this one, but what they've started integrating in their docs now are some actual video snippets. So for example, if there's like, how do I link blueprints with context sensitivity? There's like a short little 3-second, 4-second video that shows, oh, you do it this way. So that's really nice. They do admit that they're still, kind of they're still kind of doing the docs, but yeah, lots of information there. The forums, how many of you guys are actually on the Unreal forums?
Hit it every now and then, but it's a piece of information I Googled.
Yeah, the forums thankfully are sourced by Google, so if you're actually looking for stuff, I'll admit that, of course, we're a developer on the forums, but yeah, I usually stay away from posting because it's forums. I think if they had forums in Reddit format, it'd be a whole lot better, but it is what it is. And then GitHub. I think you guys are familiar with that as well, correct? No, I'm not signed in. How many of you guys actually use marketplace engines? So when you go, you launch the launcher, open your engine from there. Majority? Okay. And you guys know building from source, what that is? So the full engine, full access and stuff, that's where you get it from. So GitHub, it's available for free. You can download it. However, understand that any of the integrations, such as like Fmod for audio, WWise, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox, all of those SDKs, you have to be under NDA with Epic. You have to get approval. You have to show you're a developer. However, the engine itself, that's where you get it from source. So. The Epic Launcher Learn tab. I know I've mentioned this in the past, but I'll bring this up. So in the launcher, there is the Learn section. And through here, there's various different things. Now, let me bring up, I won't actually launch it. I'll show you guys where is it. All right, so it's the content examples. Each of these, there's a little icon down there, a little cloud. It'll download the project for you into your actual launcher. And each of those actually is a full standalone project that you can completely dissect. And Epic's been pretty good on most of these, to where they've gone in and like their materials, their blueprints and stuff, and actually commented what's doing what. These are great ways that if you're not sure, I know in content examples they've got like particle effects is one that I've even looked at, and they break down various different components of that, how to build them and stuff. So awesome resource there. Some of the other stuff as well is if you go onto the marketplace, they actually have some free stuff hidden. In particular, let me show you guys this one right here, if it'll load it. Oh, of course, it's for the Action RPG project. So this one they've admitted is kind of a living project. They've done the first iteration of it. This is a fully functional, fully operational mobile game running with Unreal Engine. So if you download this, it has every single thing that they had. It's pretty awesome. I think I spent probably about 4 hours dissecting some of this. But it is a complete standalone mobile project that you can download, you can play with, you can look at how things were built. So if you're into kind of backwards engineering, reverse engineering things, definitely look at this kind of stuff. Speaking of shame, I'm going to give a shameless plug for, I don't know if you guys have seen this. This is actually a content pack that we've developed. It's on the marketplace. We have a few out there. It's free for the month. So if you guys want it, feel free to download it. It's going back to $30 if you don't buy it now. So, huh? Yep, there you go. Bad Rhino Games. That's us. So we do some other stuff. But yeah, it's on the. If you actually go to the marketplace, and it's down here now. So each month they're doing this now. It's free for the month, and they'll release 5 different things. All the content creators that make this, we submit in, and Epic will handpick what's done. So that's it. If you guys want it, free content, feel free to do what you'd like with it.
They have a game every month right now. That's a big release for free.
Oh yeah, jumping the gun.
Sorry.
Let me see. Oh no, you're good. I'm just teasing. Let's see. No, that is a good thing. So, actually, great segue. The store. Let me see here. I know that it happened to me today. No, I can't get it. But yes, so Epic has officially released the store. Very similar to what Steam is. I can tell you there's some lovely heated wars going on behind the scenes between Steam and Epic. But they are now starting to release more games. I can tell you from inside information that I know too, Epic is big on curating indie, in particular great ideas. So if you guys are thinking about releasing the title, which may be a ways off, definitely consider that. It's a great platform. I know the revenue sharing is way more favorable. Steam takes a 30% cut off the top of your game no matter what. However, the Unreal Marketplace takes 12% flat. There is no hidden cost in there. So if you like money and making a profit, that's the way to go. And then finally, the last thing is unrealslackers.org. You can go to that. It is a Discord channel. That is a very, very big community. I want to say last time I checked, there were, I think, 7,000 or 8,000 Unreal developers that are on there. The Epic staff is on there as well. They've got several channels breaking out into like content creation, VR, packaging, blueprints. So that's a great resource if you're stumped. The forums are a dead end. You can jump on there, and people are really, really quick to respond. Okay, some of the events. Unreal Fest is coming up. I don't know how many of you guys want to go to Prague. I can tell you Unreal Fest is actually really cool. They get some really neat things there. Definitely more catered towards developers, which is awesome. A lot more resources growing you. They do a ton of talks. So that's coming up in, April 10th is that. And then the last bit that I think we've missed because it's the 27th.
Yeah.
How many of you guys have heard of the Global Game Jam? Okay, super cool. How many of you guys know what a game jam is? Okay. This is something I just wanted to bring attention to this because I would actually love if if it's not necessarily us through the Unreal Meetup, but even if we did individually, I would love to, in this coming year, participate in the next Global Game Jam. They're a lot of fun. They're great. We could even talk a little bit ahead of time, but even putting together some teams ahead of time so we know, hey, we've got some artists here, some programmers here. So we've got a really good shot at making something fun. So
The only thing I didn't like about them was that they wanted the source code. It was like, you had to really say the source license.
the pressure. Yeah. So I guess just curious, show of hands, who would be interested? I'm not going to hold you guys to it, but no.
Maybe.
Maybe? Okay. So tentative.
We got a year.
Yeah.
I'd have to learn more about it, but
I don't work well under pressure, I know myself too.
Yeah.
I know Unreal is doing one on February 14th.
For what?
Their game jam. They have the winter game jam.
Hmm.
I think it's February 14th.
Yeah. That's interesting that you guys said, because that was actually one of the things that came up in the survey that a lot of people said they wanted to do a game jam. So it may be local, less national pressure.
There's one in Columbia this weekend,
Yeah.
which I was in the first 2 days, but Sunday I was in Super Bowl, so I don't know.
Yeah, that does seem kind of.
Well, honestly, the Venn diagram of people who like the Super Bowl and people who want to do game jams, and not really that.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah, but.
Yay, sports. Yeah. Okay, so a couple things, kind of some noteworthy announcements that have come up. This was actually that scene I was telling you about from Mad Max. Let me play for you guys. I think they linked it on here. This is on the news, on their news blog. They got a little podcast there. It's kind of cool to listen to if you want something in the background. Yeah, this one.
Which Mad Max the
Fury. So, I will preface, I don't have the speakers, just go through the monitor. I will preface, they did not use this in actual production. This was a post thing, so obviously they already shot it and stuff. But they went back in with Unreal and said, hey, what if we did this differently? And so as it's played, the top one is the pre-made in Unreal using the final shots.
Before they did the hand-drawn storyboards, now with a lot of gaps between it, and for something that complicated, they can just render more.
Yeah.
See the whole thing computer generated. It's like, let's do that live.
Yeah, this is huge. This is huge, especially in the film world. Because of this alone, you're talking about cutting your pre-production time down probably in a quarter, which is massive. I mean, they've already got big budgets, but and even talking about indie films, being able to shoot something and know what you're getting before you pay by the hour for staff. Let's see. I think what was this? Yeah. Okay. So I
I don't know
did.
sales and marketing, but a lot of that stuff helps sell your idea to get the money from whoever that's going to fund it.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to imagine what you're trying to sell, the more you can show.
Yeah.
Quick and easy tools.
I'll let this play. How many of you guys have heard of this game coming out from Deep Rock? Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So really, really cool story here. They're a small, still an indie team, I think. I don't know a whole lot about the studio, but they put this together. This is on there as well. They just sold $500,000 in pre-sales. And I think they was in early access. A cool story if you guys want to read this. This is on the Epic blog. I know they've got some videos and stuff, but really cool story about how they just took an idea and kind of, I think they even say too, but kind of clunked their way through the engine, and we're still able to produce something. So I think that's a good feel story to read too, because it does kind of show that you don't have to be an expert to be able to get an idea down. So really cool story there. The store, I know we kind of talked about this one. Like I said, I would be
One
keeping.
thing
Yeah.
about the future, when it's so easy for people to make games, there's a lot of bad stuff out there. Where before, there wasn't as much stuff.
Yep.
You know, so it's harder for people to find a good in-demand stuff.
Yeah.
More competition, more noise.
So the Epic's Game Store, we'll go there because we kind of attack this, but that's huge right now for the industry. In particular for indies, AAA is not as much. The profitability from it, the accessibility, and the reach that they have in comparison to Steam, that's huge. I could go and talk about how much I hate Steam right now from an indie perspective. This is a huge game changer. So.
No pun intended.
What?
No pun intended.
Yeah, I know. This is kind of cool too. AGOG Labs and 3 Lateral. 3 Lateral is what I'm talking about. 2 acquisitions from Epic in the past week. 3 Lateral has done some really great things for human realism, for being able to capture using like a mobile phone to do face tracking and stuff. So some really cool tech that's probably going to be coming down the pipe in 6 to 12 months through that. And then of course AGOG Labs, they do some really cool things with AI. And then lastly, another thing, this is kind of cool too. This was actually a student film that was made with Unreal Engine. I may let it play. So you guys can see. Not bad for a student film. I figured that was pretty cool too, just to show some of the. We'll cover a few things on it, but using Unreal Engine for cinematics, so actually doing real-time camera stuff on that. Okay, cool. So we'll dive in now to what is ahead for the Meetup group. So all through February, March, April, May, and June. So I think that's five-part series. We're actually going to be running through. Let me pull it up for you guys real quick so you can see. We're actually going to step through creating this. Now this is a kind of a little product configurator demo that we made, but we're going to actually step through the whole process creating this from start to finish. So it's going to be broken down into a few different sections. I'll just show you guys what it is real quick. So there's a free cam. We have the ability to kind of go through some preset cameras. We can change the paint color. We'll actually step through how we kind of did that in Substance, how we created all the textures and things, how we manipulate them in the engine. The ability to kind of create an animation that goes, and then lastly, to do a cinematic sequence. So something that you kind of script ahead of time, some great depth of field, actually seeing it in real time, packaging the whole thing, creating a menu system as well that actually works, and being able to exit. So we'll dive into even all the blueprints behind it, how to get it so it's configurable, and all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing that is on the agenda for us over the next few months. I will say, as a note, one of the things that I want to provide to you guys over the course of this year is a better understanding and more confidence in releasing things. So as opposed to kind of sticking in the world of dabbling and actually getting products out there, even if they're horrible demos, releasing, and going through ideas and testing stuff. So this is one way we'll do it. So we'll actually just kind of create a relatively simple, very lightweight demo, but that should cover. I know that this doesn't necessarily fall into the game or into the realm of traditional game development. However, everything that's included in this, you could actually use in game development. So hopefully that's cool. Is that okay? Cool. I will say too that if you guys have, for example, laptops that you work with, absolutely feel free to bring them. We'll kind of be walking through that together. Oh, another side note too. You guys probably didn't know this, but we're actually live streaming right now, which is kind of cool. I know we had talked about that last year. Brooke and I actually tested it over the past couple days, getting it up. It's actually been running now, very stable. But that is another resource for those of you that drive an exorbitant amount, or if we had inclement weather or something like that, to make it more accessible. Obviously, we'd love to have you guys show up, but in the event that something comes up, maybe you've got kids, babysitter fails out on you, you don't want to miss the meetup, it will be recorded. Additionally, it's set up right now, but YouTube page. So we'll actually post all of the previous meetups. So if you guys missed something or went over something and you're like, shoot, I forgot absolutely what that was, we will post the videos as well. So that should be hopefully pretty good. Okay, and let me go back to this. And finally, so after we do the 5-part series, again, we'll go from the actual asset creation process. That's what we'll do next month. In March, we're actually going to do the whole level and road bike setup. So that's doing all the blueprints, all the coding behind it. On the 3rd, we'll actually do camera setup. And part of that will include cinematics. There's a lot of things that can be useful for that. And then in May, we'll actually go through the whole process of creating the cinematics, controlling cameras. So you're actually doing more cinematic stuff. So actual film, camera technology, verbiage, and all that kind of stuff. And then the last part of that in June will be the actual packaging and deploying. What we'll also do in that one as well, like I mentioned, is profiling. So finding out why is it performing slow, what can I do to improve it. Huge steps that kind of take you from that beginner amateur to now you're really starting to go with grease. And then in July, we're actually going to go through kind of more an artistic thing, doing level design and creating dioramas. I think you guys know what dioramas are, but just little mini scenes. So it's going to be kind of all the tools and tech that you would use if you were building a large game or something, but all of those tools to create something that looks beautiful, that runs great. So we'll be going through that. And then in August, September, how many of you have used blueprints or are comfortable with blueprints? Okay, a little bit. So I've actually been given some resources from Epic, and we're going to do just a blueprint crash course. So if you have no idea about blueprint, I'm teaching it, so that means you're going to know it because I've actually been learning a ton through this. But we're going to step through from kind of beginning to end. And the hope is that by September's meetup, that you guys will be very comfortable and confident with blueprints to the point that if you went on and you looked at content examples, you could dissect those. That's really my hope with that. So for example, like taking the Action RPG project, based off of the knowledge that we get through August and September, you guys could open that entire project, break apart their blueprints, and go, oh yeah, I know where this is going, and oh, this goes to a hidden function. I know how to trace that function down and know exactly what's going on. Then in October, November, still thinking about what we're going to do. I may have some guest speakers, not really sure yet, but that is the year coming up. So hopefully, I mean, I don't know, round of applause or something. Is that something that you guys are excited about that should? Cool, okay.
What was the name of the YouTube channel again? Just
Which?
KCV.
Yeah, I think if you just, I've branded everything under KC Unreal Developers.
Okay.
If you want the actual YouTube channel, it's UCU5IWM2CF. I will. How many of you guys are actually on the Discord and Twitter? Of course. Okay. I'll post all this stuff as well. Like I said too, Brooke and I have kind of been. This is our soft test today to make sure everything works appropriately. But I'll post the first video on this. I'll put a blast in our Discord as well on Twitter, so you guys have all this.
We have someone joining us.
Oh, cool. Nice. Okay, so that is the outline for this year. So I will tell you that I'm actually excited about this. If there was one thing that I would say from the meetup that I personally would like to see us get out of this, by the end of the year, I would love to see the group as a whole producing things. So, if we're walking through this, like I said, feel free to build this on your own. I would love to be able to kind of have a show and tell. It doesn't necessarily be the configurator that we built, but maybe you've done something else. Maybe it's just a cube that changes color or shape. I would love to see us actually producing things and really just kind of build the whole game dev scene this year. Cool. All right. So we're going to take like a little 10-minute break real quick because I've actually got to go to the restroom. The rest of today, what I have planned is we're actually going to light this puppy. So I'm going to show you how to do this from taking just, this is actually from the Epic Zen Garden. I stripped it down and took out a bunch of stuff so it was more just an ArchViz. But I'm going to show you guys how to light this and the main concepts behind it. Relatively quickly, so that way you could produce like actual architectural renderings. This does run in real time. I think when I was testing it at home on a 1080, just a regular 1080, I was doing 230 frames a second. So it's real good. Okay, so we'll break and then we'll come back in 10 minutes. Sound good? Okay, cool. Let me check something real quick.
So you're saying it's acting like
Oh, you know what? Mine does.
you have it?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Try it. No. It's just Twitch has actually integrated some really cool new features called where you can timestamp things, make a note. So if there's like something critical, that's where just like take a break. All right. Okay, interesting. So it is online. Okay.
Oh, I made a note.
I may just have you log in there.
No worries.
I just found the video that you got to show us.
One step ahead of the game.
Oh, yeah. Because I was looking up the YouTube channel he was talking about, and it showed up his. So,
Oh, yeah.
oh, yeah.
Work was found.
I think I thought we were about to. Yeah. 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 That and like the Unreal.
That's great. Yeah, that's actually exactly my YouTube, which is
Gotcha. This was the Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
actually able to secure that line. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I pulled it up and I'm like, yep, that's him.
Yep.
I can comments on the survey, I mentioned something about programming background, so I saw
Yeah.
so use all the rendering capabilities of this
Yeah.
I don't look for instance at how I can program so to make very basic instructions.
Yeah.
You know, it's I don't know where that connect is. Software runs the game to rendering.
Gotcha.
So I just picked up whatever. So,
Cool. This should help too, because I mean, even though.
because I don't want to deal with lighting. And, you know, I study OpenGL. I know
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I don't want to recreate all that.
Yeah.
People
Arizona sunshine.
all this.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I just want
Um,
to, here's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know,
We're actually looking into buying
Take this
some
one,
more
so,
gun controllers,
you know,
like the wrong,
3D.
so that it's
Just
more
gonna
of
say,
a
okay,
range.
I want to light it here.
Also
Yeah,
one that might
here's
be a little bit strange.
You
So
know,
this should be pretty good then.
Because
Yeah.
my games aren't playing, it's not all this visual, it's
But-
kind of retro.
Honestly, if you want to get the highest
This
points,
is improving because you get the program.
suffer through the story.
And those aren't even 3D environments.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, well, even the cheapest computer now has a decent 3D capability. So, you know, OpenGL used to be just for the high-end, you know, workstation, you know, engineering stuff. But now it's like, well, everything can do it, so might as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus now that this stuff is pretty much free, you know, it's like I'd be happy to pay a royalty to get all of this capability. I have been looking at the Unity just because I will not, well, not just Unity, but you know, Wikipedia's got a list of game engines, and there's like 3 dozen there, you know, and what do they, you know, some are designed for non-programmers,
Right.
you know, and just 2D games. It's like, no, I want something more sophisticated. So, and plus I was curious, how does the physics engine, you know, Unity uses bullet physics apparently, and I think Unreal uses the physics or something.
Yep. There's also some other plugins. I know like Apex is a part of that too, like Apex clothing.
And that's something that, you know, a lot of my games are like sports. I want good collision detection and a response. And so what is it? How does it work?
Yeah.
But I do more, I have my own unrealistic physics that I, you know, like I said, I don't do simulations. So I, you know, things like magnetic fields and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I need to apply my own forces. I can't just say, yes, apply gravity.
Yeah.
You know,
and you can do a lot
so
of
it's
that,
like,
yeah.
what, you know, how does the game development tool, you know, what does it expose? What do I, you know, what's there? What do I have to program? How do I program it? You know, and in the network play, that's a big deal for me. How does it work? How, you know, what do I have
And
to
they've
know?
actually got some great stuff.
So I've just been
Fortnite
going
in particular,
through,
man.
reading about a lot of different game engines. You know, Unreal might not be the best thing for me, but, you know, like I said, it might be, well, even when I first read about it, they said it's good for like the first-person shooters. It's like, well, I don't develop that kind of thing, so maybe it's not.
I would. So what I would recommend.
But they have a
is-
2D stuff too, and so
Yeah.
it's like there's just, you know, oh, and you talked about you know, beginner or experts. Like, well, are you the programmer or are you an artist? Because I'm not an artist. So
I would say look at I know under the Learn tab in the content examples they actually have some like 2D side scroller stuff like
yeah,
it's being used for that as well. And I will say if you're more in advanced programming, I would say go with Unreal over Unity because Unity in particular there is a hard wall you get.
yeah, you were talking about that. But see, I don't know enough about any of the game engines to know what's good and bad.
But you know enough programming that you'll hit it sooner than
Oh,
most
yeah.
people like just picking it up. And when you do, you realize every other step after that is the step you make.
I just want to learn
versus-
enough about them to know what's good and what's bad and understand why I don't want to use this one or why I definitely want to use this one over that one. It's just, you know, I've got another job, so I can't just spend all my time studying game engines.
Right. Right.
But-
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, everything that you show me, it's like, oh, cool. Oh, it does that. Oh, that's neat. Oh, it's like, wow. You know, because one of the things I did not want to do in my game graphics was shadows. I mean, I wanted shadows, but that's a complex thing
Right.
to
You
do.
want real time lighting. You want.
You know, it's like, well, can't I just get the library to do it or a game engine, whatever, instead of, you know, in like physics, I started studying
vectors and polygons, the collision, and all
Right.
because there wasn't anything out there back in 2006 when I thought I really want to get back into the game development. What are the library? And it just wasn't out there.
Stuff, yeah.
It's like, oh, here's a cool one, but it's this, like I said before, physics. When I first got the info video about physics, and it's like, do you have to have an NVIDIA VBoard? It's like, oh no, oh cool, and then I was doing other engineering work, and it's like I wish I had more time to do the games. And so I'm trying to just make that a higher priority. And so when this group showed up, it was like, oh cool, and I could learn some people who know this stuff. I thought you talk about doing a game project. I have some simple ideas, and I thought, as a team effort, somebody who's an artist could do the art part, and I could do like the program logic part.
You should actually bring that up because that would be really good, even if it's just kind of collaboration.
Some of it is just like I said, retro games. I take stuff like Pac-Man and make a multiplayer game out of it. Not like one you've seen, but it's based on something that it's kind of a puzzle game. Not a big grab. It's not a lot of art. I just don't create things like that. Millipedes and but a multiplayer twist on it. And even an AI Pac-Man, it's not totally original, but there's a programming competition where the programmers write the AI for Ms. Pac-Man to play against the ghost. And I thought, well, my version of multiplayer is for the players to play the ghosts. And the computer does AI, and so I'm thinking the data structure. So what do I need to represent the maze? How do I do the AI? Because there's a lot of data to handle. And so these are my game issues. It has nothing to do with the art and the rendering, but at some point you got to draw it on the screen. So I'm doing the mathematical modeling behind the scenes, and then I just want a convenient way to display it using a library or an engine or whichever is the best for it.
Cool.
We'll get so. That's stuff in the months ahead. Depends on how much time I have.
That'll be good. Yeah, we'll need to. Yeah, I'd love to. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit later too.
Because some of the people that showed up, like the students were interested in game art. They didn't want to be programmers.
Well, I'm an artist.
Script writer. Yeah, and I know you and the other guy was like, not a programmer, level editor. And those are just different skills. It's like I'm not even going to try to be a good artist. There's so much other stuff.
Which is good, but if you got the programming side, that's
it's like. I try to be good at everything, but I can't be great at everything. And so it's like, there's so much work to do. Team up with somebody who is interested and has a complementary skill.
Okay, cool. I think we had everybody back. Okay. All right, so we'll step through this. So this is literally the final scene to show you guys that it's not like a still image. Like this is the actual scene rendered out. Hopefully you can see. Is that the light washing it out at all?
I can see it. You're talking about see
we can turn the lights on.
It's pretty good, but dimmer would be better, I think.
Okay, that'll be pretty good.
I like to just turn off these and leave those on.
Oh, actually.
Way to take over the entire space.
Oh, one light.
See, those are the ones we want off, and you want those.
Okay, we'll keep those.
It's so good.
Okay.
It's not like it's too dark.
How many of you guys actually have experience lighting stuff in Unreal? This should just be the default answer.
Like there's a checkbox that you turn.
Yeah.
Throw a bunch of lights in.
Okay. Yeah. Great point. Thank you. So this setup is going to avoid that. One of the things that can get very expensive is lighting very, very quickly. If you guys haven't seen it already, but Unreal actually only supports 4 overlapping lights at once, dynamic lights. So what that means is that if you have, I'll go into kind of game mode here. But for example, if I put down like a point light, there is a sphere, so that outer sphere that you guys can see, you can only have 4 of those. Now granted, if you do switch it, so movable and stationary. So movable is fully dynamic. Stationary is actually kind of a hybrid. It still allows for dynamic light, but it also bakes into your shadows. And then of course, static is just fully baked. And the reason why you would want to do that is this is an example of bake lighting. This may be a little difficult to see. Yeah, that is absolutely impossible to see. Let me do something real quick. I'm jumping ahead of myself real quick, but hopefully this
I mean, there's not really anybody else in here if you want to drop the light. It's up to you.
Maybe that's a little bit easier to see. But you see this really nice kind of rich contact shadow and this beautiful fall off. That is all baked lighting. Baked lighting, we're still not there, and I don't know if technology will ever be there unless we're 15 years in the future. But to get that kind of accuracy in lighting really only comes from baked lighting. So even in game development, you're going to do baked lighting, and you're going to have a real-time light. So, for example, the skylight that we have here, which is just a kind of a directional light, that's actually running stationary. So it is processing a little bit of dynamic light. So if we had a character, you would see a real-time shadow, but it's also contributing to the baked lighting to give us in that. So, okay, so I'm going to basically just break this scene back down to nothing. So I'm going to do unlit so you guys can see. So again, the point of what I want to do with this one is not the assumption that you guys are creating the assets, but that you've got them and you just want to make them look pretty. Okay, so the first thing that we will do, and I'm not going to recreate them, but over here, you just got a post-processing volume, and we would drag this into the scene. Are you guys familiar with post-processing volumes at all? Okay, so what a post-processing volume has is basically color correction, film, and kind of all of your post-processing effects on top. So in that, this is where, so I'm going to go back to lit mode real quick. I'm going to set this to unbound. If it's not unbound, that little yellow cube you see is actually the area of effect. And I'll show you here real quick. So I'm going to take this real fast. I'm going to global. I'm just going to take my gamma and crank it up. So if I go inside of here, so you can see once I get inside of this cube, it changes. That's my post-processing volume. So it's applying certain image effects over the top to make things happen. But if I go down here to unbound, it applies over the whole scene. So that's what a post-processing volume is. There's some really cool things that we'll do, and I'll come back to where this could be beneficial.
Would you be using that from like going inside to outside? So
Yes.
Brighter?
Yeah. Some other examples are like, for example, if you're going underwater, you kind of get that blue-green tint. You can do the post-processing volume. Or say another case in point where these are used a lot is say that you're going from a bright lit outdoor scene into a cave. You probably put another post-processing volume in there that bumps your gamma up, so it's not like super dark. So that's one way to do it. Another note too about post-processing volumes, if I'm not mistaken, smaller ones take precedence over larger ones. I believe there's also a way to set a priority for these. Yeah, right here, priority 0. So higher priorities will affect others. So you could have a global post-process over your whole scene. Let's say you do go into a cave. You can bump that as a higher priority. Once they enter that, it then takes those effects. So in this case, all I've done is I've added a neutral one. That's purely because this is an ArchViz. So the assumption is you don't want it to just constantly be ramping up and down. You guys have probably seen this before too in an Unreal scene that when you're looking at stuff, you look down like a dark corner, it gets all of a sudden really bright. You look back up and it gets really dark. This neutralizer, all I've really done is gone in and turned everything off that I don't want. So there's no chromatic aberration. All the color settings are neutral. Really the key one here is this exposure. So my min brightness and my max brightness are set at 1. It's clean. So now when I do any of my lighting changes, I know what my neutral value is. So that's it. Does that make sense on the kind of the neutral post-processing volume, what that is? Just a neutralizer? Okay. So the second thing I've done with that is I've actually duplicated that and created this guy. Now he's kind of scaled up. Let me put it back down here. He's unbound as well, so it doesn't really matter. And this is the one that I'm going to do all of my color correction on. So if I wanted to increase the contrast a little bit, I do it with my second post-processing volume. Reason for that, you're kind of confused. So here's why. So I'm going to go in at this point with that second post-processing volume turned off. So everything is neutral and flat. I'm going to light it that way. So then I know if I've got clipped values, so if the light's too bright, the shadows are too dark, I know and I can fix those. So once I know my lighting's neutral, then I'll go in and maybe increase the contrast, maybe some of the saturation. So I'm always working off of a scene that's perfectly balanced. Does that make sense? It's a good process, kind of a fun little technique. That way you're not fighting your post-processing volume. Because if you, I've seen some people do this where like they'll go into the post-processing volume, and here I'll even show you some of this stuff.
Because it's all relative, this is making it so that you have a baseline. So
Yep.
any change you make, you know you're going to get an expected result.
Right, so like I'm just gonna crank up chromatic aberration. I'll take like my bloom way up. I'll even do vignette intensity. Maybe add some gradient. This is absolutely horrible. So the point is, what you can see, I've introduced artifacts now to my rendering. Colors, darkness, lightness. So if I try to light this in a way that I want it to look better, I'm now overcompensating for the things I just added in. So by going in, let me reset all these, because this is absolutely horrible. Down, exposure. What?
It's like you just got the antidote to a poison or something.
Right, exactly. There's another thing you can do as well with post-processing volume. So you can actually go in and reset all this. Okay, there we go. I absolutely just screwed the pooch on that one. That was horrible. No. But yeah, you can do all those kind of effects. But again, that's why I say, especially when you're doing lighting stuff, start with a neutral scene. Make sure you don't have anything else in there, and then go in and add it afterwards. Okay, so that's the neutral one, and then the second one, that's where we'll actually add all our stuff. But again, for now, I just got it turned off. So we should say enabled. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of our base scene. All right, so the first step with this, like I said, I've got it in lit mode, and unfortunately there is some lighting information in there, but that's just because it's been pre-built. If actually, you know, that's a good. Let me show you guys how to get rid of that. So if you've got some lighting data in your scene and you don't want that, underneath your world settings, so if you go from the window, world settings right here, you scroll down to the bottom. This is rolled up under your. I always find this hysterical. I know why they do it, but Epic is funny with hiding things because like it's light matte setting. It's one little roll up, but if you click it, there's like all of this good stuff in here. But down below, there's a little roll up, and here's your light map. If you do, check forced, no pre-computed lighting, and you go up to build your lighting. It doesn't really matter what it's on. I'm going to put it on preview, and I build lighting. It kills all your light maps. So now everything is completely erased. Go back in and uncheck it, because if you're sitting there going, why won't my lighting build? But that's a way that we can get rid of all that. So you can see lighting needs to be rebuilt, hence why it's black. So I'm just going to go back to so the first thing that you want to do with lighting, and I think this is it's probably not stressed enough, are these reflection spheres. These make a huge difference in your renderings. So with a reflection sphere, I'll go back to detail panels here. There's really two methods of reflection spheres outside of settings. One is a captured scene, and one is a specific cube map. So this sphere is actually going to reproject lighting information and reflections into your environment. And with captured scene, that reflection sphere is going to capture at its point, make a very small kind of environmental sphere map, and apply it to that. If you do specific cube map, you can do your own. So there may be some really cool effects with this. Say, for example, you've got like an automotive ArchViz kind of thing where you've got a really cool car, but you want it to make it look like it's sitting out on a piazza in Italy or something. And you don't want to build that whole scene, but you want the reflections there. You can put in a specific cube map that will reproject all that lighting information, that color information back on it. But again, the key point with this one is that you want it to capture the information that will be baked down to it. So I won't step through how I set up all of these, but something to note is that you'll notice that I've got some really big ones and some really small ones. Small ones always take precedence over larger reflection spheres. The key takeaway with this that I will say is, how do you know you have enough reflection spheres? You just have to constantly just kind of play with it. So start with the big one and look, for example, we've got these kind of windows here. That that sphere reflection will reflect the environment on that window. Now with that huge one, it's going to look like a little island. So if you're looking at that window, you go, clearly I'm not this far zoomed out. So add a smaller reflection sphere by the window, you'll then get the local reflections close to it and it'll look more realistic.
Maybe enabled, disabled by distance from the camp view.
Yeah, so in the actual settings, we've got an influence radius and a brightness. I would say that as a general statement, keep them at 1. But with the influence radius, that's going to increase. It's probably going to be hard to see here since I don't have lighting built. You can kind of see, actually, can you guys see that all right, where it's kind of affecting the window? And see how it's the reflection's actually getting bigger and smaller. So in this situation, I start with the big one. Look, I don't have the appropriate reflections. Drop this guy in. Keep them as small as necessary. Like this might be better, kind of around that area. And then stop there. If you need to go smaller, add a smaller one. The last note on this one, so again, I know it's, don't think, you can kind of see there. See in the actual upper right section here, this little ledge piece, as I increase that brightness, let me take it to like 16. See how it's actually injecting more reflections of what looks like lighting information into the scene? That's why you want to be careful with these things and not crank them up too much, because then you're kind of doing the exact same effect that I said with post-processing volume. You're now fighting white is so bright here, lower your main light, now you're competing with it. So yeah, so that would be the first step, is just adding your reflection captures at points where it's logical. The other thing too is to take note of where would your head be if you were looking at this thing. That's why like it's kind of in the middle there, because it's probably looking at the window. Maybe right here, like I don't want one way up, because it will reflect from that location it's captured, if that makes sense. Last thing on reflection captures is under your build menu, there is a build reflection capture. So if you find that you're adding things in there and they're not accurately reflecting, it's like, why does it still look like it's way off? Just go in, build reflection captures, it's like instant, and now you've got all that reflection down. Cool. Okay. Next thing, so I've got them turned off, but let me go in here, is adding a skylight. So I'm going to, I'll actually just add one from the start. So we'll go over into our panel here, add a skylight. So this should be the first one. This is just an ambient one, and this will actually project. There's two things, very similar to the reflection cubes. You've got a captured scene, or you can actually project your own HDRI into it. For this one, I'm actually going to project our own HDRI because the scene itself is kind of bland. I'll show you the HDRI that we're using. So this is the one that I picked up. There's a ton of these out on the internet. Nothing fancy here. When you import the image, just make sure your compression settings are set to HDR. And you may find where I got this one from, it was already balanced, so I didn't have to really do any adjustments. But if you find you're bringing something in that's too dark or too bright, you can actually adjust them in these adjustments layers here. So I'm going to take this guy, and instead of captured scene, I'm going to change them to SSL specific cube map, drop them in, and there we go. So now we're getting that coloration, that the lighting kind of direction from that cube map, which is great. It's what I wanted. So I'm going to go into game mode real quick and hide this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my source angle. So you'll get it from like that angle. Let me go down here. I think I have. Just go and build on
Would
it.
it make sense to make the skybox and use that cube map?
You could, yeah. So I think, yeah, there we go. So now you can kind of see the reflections of the actual HDR being projected into the scene. Now, with this setup, this is just a sky sphere. Now, what this one's using is very, very simple material, but it's actually using a spherical map as opposed to an HDR. This was just what they set up in it. So if we try to replace it, it actually probably look kind of funny. But yeah, I guess I will note on this one too. So this sphere is actually this guy that's in the world. All it's doing is projecting the spherical map inward. So it's kind of like it's a totally old school method of doing a sky sphere. That's all it is. The only difference with this one is you notice it's plugged into the emissive color. That's because it's actually producing just a little bit of light into the scene. So when we go to bake lighting, this is gonna add just a tiny, tiny touch. And the way you do that is under this cloud, the actual material itself, if you click it, shading model is unlit. But if you scroll down under usage, there's one under here that says used with static lighting is checked. So when you bake your static lighting, this will add a little bit of information in it. So again, nothing fancy, totally old school. It's purely just a backdrop. It's not really doing much else beyond that. Okay, so back to our skylight here. The thing that I want to take note of is we do have it set to stationary. We could go static. I'm going to keep it stationary so we can see what's happening, but it will bake the information in once we go to actually bake. The first thing that I changed here was the cube mat angle. So this is where you can adjust the rotation of that HDR and kind of spin it in the direction you want. For this demo, I just want the light coming in kind of from the left. I think it was kind of a cool little highlight here. Next thing, geez. There we go, 160. It may be a little difficult to see, but you notice how that sun's kind of pixelated a little bit? Because we're doing an ArchViz stuff, I want to bump that up. So where you can do that is in this cube map resolution. I think it comes in normally by default at like 64. That's a happy accident because that looks good, but actually that's way pixelated. You can bump that up, say like 512, 1024 is kind of becoming negligible, but by simply bumping that from the 128 to 512, increasing that resolution, while it does increase a little bit of my GPU memory, it makes a reflection look much, much nicer. I can tell you from a performance standpoint, I mean, we're still running up there 240 frames a second. I think we still got a little bit of overhead left over, so that's totally fine. And then finally, the last thing is this intensity. That's probably going to be the other thing that you change. If you find that the skylight is adding too much light to it, you can bump that down. You can also bump it up a little bit more. Cool. Okay, and then the rest is all just default, and we'll keep it as that. There really shouldn't be anything else in here that we need to do. Okay, so on to the next portion, which is simply adding just a directional light. So we'll go over here, and then under lights, we've got a directional light. This is going to be our main light caster. So this is going to be kind of our main sunlight, where we want it coming from. Now with this one, we can go and we can adjust. Obviously, I want it to be kind of in the same direction. That clearly doesn't make any sense. My sun's on the left, but my light's coming from the right. So I'm simply just going to kind of put it in kind of in the same area. Again, this is just kind of.
Is there a way to visualize the previous map that you put on so you can see where it considers the light coming from?
You could. Like I said, I know this is like an HDR sphere. I don't think. I mean, we can try it real quick. I mean, it won't hurt anything. I don't believe. Yeah, because it's going to become. Yeah, see, this is an HDR, not a fixed one. If you did have, we could save this out as like.
Into a cube and
yeah.
Use that as a.
Yeah. So if you really wanted to be specific, since this map you do have a sun location, and we've simply offset that with an angle, we could go in. I think 0 is centered here in the map, and I want to say that we've rotated this guy 160. So you could go in with your directional light and kind of get it accurate from that. I'm just going to guess right now. Yeah. So there's some mathematical ways you could kind of go about that, but.
I guess that's a program where you always wants it to line up exactly.
Right. It would be perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get good enough for this demo. So for this one, I'm not gonna dive too deep into the lighting. We'll keep it set at stationary so we still get that. Because if we went static, I think it will show up like this. But as soon as we bake our lighting, we're not going to see those dynamic shadows anymore. I don't need it fully dynamic. I want stationary because I still want to bake the lighting in there. So I want to get contact shadows from this light. So I'll keep it at stationary. Next one is the intensity. This is what we'll probably change the most when we go to bake. For reference values, this is unitless in Unreal, so this isn't using candles or lux. You can actually set that. It comes in default by 10, which is absolutely a horrible number. if you were in the middle of a desert with a scorching, blaring sun at 12 o'clock, it's actually about 7.5. So 10 is coming in at like super, super bright. There is actually a magical number, which is kind of just a nice semi-overcast day, and that is 3.14 pi. I know there's probably some mathematical thing behind that. That's from Epic themselves. But I would start at like 3. You can drop it lower if you want to, and just go from there. So we'll keep it at 3 for right now. Next thing is, since we're doing kind of a sunset scene here, I want to add some coloration to it. Now I could go in the color picker and I could select a color, or I can actually click on the eyedropper, which is kind of fun, and source any color from on my monitor. So if I get close to the sun and kind of get something that's relatively close, now I'm actually just sourcing color from the HDR, which is kind of cool. That's actually really hard to see, isn't it? It did change color. I promise you, on my monitor, it's kind of orangey. So we changed color. That looks good. We don't have to worry about, I think, anything else. We'll have effects, world. Oh, this is another setting in here that you may want to change, but we'll keep set for now because we're going to set somewhere else. And that is this indirect lighting intensity and volumetric scattering intensity. So when you go to bake your light, it's actually going to intensify that light's contribution to it if you set it there. But in the situation that I'll show you, we're actually going to control it globally. So both our skylight, our sky sphere, and our main light are going to contribute holistically. So cool. So that's pretty much it. So we've got our neutral post-processing volume. We added our skylight with the HDR, rotate a little bit, kept the intensity at default, but bumped up our cube map resolution. We went ahead and dropped our directional light. Again, set to stationary, so we get baked lighting information, but we also get dynamics. Simply change the intensity and the light color. And that's it. So that's our whole scene setup. The next part, this is the magic behind making you look like an amateur and looking like a pro. And that is setting up your light mask settings. So critical. So in there, we're actually going to go into world settings. So again, it's under window, world settings here. It'll pop up this little tab. And in there, we're going to expand this light mask settings. And I'll kind of explain what each one of these are. But light mask is the actual program that goes behind baking lighting in Unreal. So that is the system that will run. I don't have it set up here, but one of the things that's really cool about light mask, because it's calculating, it is CPU bound. So there's really no way to make it go faster other than setting up a render farm, which is kind of cool. And that can be any machine that you have on your local network. We've actually even been able to do it over VPN and take care of like a whole network internally. But when you go to bake your lighting, I'll show you on the CPU graph, it pegs all your CPUs. So if you got computers sitting around your house, or you really want to tick off your wife with her computer, put light mask on it, click build, and she's like, why is the computer slow? I don't know, maybe she shouldn't use it for right now. But it will take advantage of all those cores to build it much, much faster. But that is what light mask is. So this is going to be our bake lighting information. The first setting that you want to change is your actual light level scale. What that means is that by scaling it down, you're actually increasing the amount of data points that are calculated. So you're going to get a much more accurate rendering and much more accurate lighting by having that smaller. Now, something to note here is that your indirect lighting quality and your static lighting level scale are inherently linked together. What I mean by that is you want both of those to always equal 1. So if you notice, I took my indirect lighting quality, which this is the higher you bump it, the smoother your results. 2 times 0.5 is 1. You always want it to equal 1. So if I decrease my static lighting level scale to say like 0.1, my level lighting smoothness should be 10. 10 times 0.1 is 1. So that's just something to note. If you don't get it exactly at 1, don't worry. It's not like it's also just going to artifacts everywhere. But you should keep those two in correlation together to always equal 1. All right, so the next setting that will change is the number of indirect lighting bounces. In fact, actually, you know what? Let me just show you guys what it is from default. So we'll change this to 0.5, and our indirect lighting quality, I think it was smoothness. Yeah, quality will take up to 2. Guess what it was. Yep. Okay, so those are set. Number of indirect lighting bounces. Bounces. I have seen so many people get this wrong and set it up to like 50 or 100. Technically, anything above 7, you don't really hardly notice anymore. You may, if you zoom in really close to a corner and it's just pure gray, you're like, oh, look, that pixel is now perfect. So for all intents and purposes, 10 will be a safe bet. I don't think I've ever gone above 10 myself, and it's perfect. You don't notice anything above that on upwards. Number of sky bounces. This is actually what your skylight contribution is going to be. So very similar to what your indirect lighting bounces are. So for this one, I'm just setting it to 10 too, because we've got a really nice HDR. It's not just projecting color, it's actually doing, or it's like a flat color. So we'll bump that up to 10 as well. And the last bit is, are you guys familiar with volumetric light maps, what they are? A little bit. Okay, so when you go to bake your lighting, and I'll show this, remind me if I don't pop it up here. But what a volumetric light map is it basically creates all these little points within your light propagation volume, so where it's actually calculated in the lighting. And each of these little points, they're kind of visible as little spheres, contain the lighting information at that point. So for example, if it's off in the middle of space and sunlight's here, that sphere is going to look like it has that lighting information being projected on there. So it calculates in all these areas, dark shadows, light shadows. Where this is extremely handy, they actually integrated this tech in Paragon, is you can bake your lighting out and you bake this volumetric light map. So as your character passes in and out of these spaces, it inherits that baked lighting, the directional information and the shadows. So it's beautiful, but with it, there's a couple things that we want to change, and that is just bumping the size of it down to 40. So we get more concentration of those detail cells. So it does increase a little bit on calculations, but make sure we pack more of those and get better information. And that should be it. We'll come back to this in a minute. Once you see the first bake, I know just from having done this ahead of time, we're going to bump up our environment intensity and diffuse boost. Same thing with what we had seen in our directional light. That's actually just going to increase the contributions of that and just make it more intense. Cool. Directional light, skylight, post-processing volume, and now our lightness settings. So all that's left to do is to build. So under this, my recommendation going through this, so you've got 4 different lighting quality settings you can set it. Preview, medium, high, and production. Preview is very, very quick. As you guys do more and more lighting, you'll actually start to notice ahead of time in your preview builds, oh, that's fine, or oh no, I need to fix that. So you know a lot better once you go to build it what things to look for, and I'll point out a couple of those. The difference between preview and medium is a much more significant jump than from medium to high. So once you go from preview to medium, it will take a little bit longer. Luckily, this one's quick. From medium to high, honestly, I'm kind of, I get why they have it there, but I don't really know. I don't see much of a benefit on my end from baking from medium to high. Personally, I just go from preview to medium to confirm, and then go to production. Production absolutely takes a long time, but the results themselves are beautiful. And that's what I actually saw in the screenshot was a production build of it. So we'll just keep it on preview for right now. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and build lighting only, and we'll kind of see what we do. And I'll show you guys here as well. So there's a couple of things to bring this up, show you that it is CPU intensive. GPU, nothing. CPU, everything. So having a good CPU is key. Come on. There we go. So this is that program I was saying about. This is Lightmass that runs in the background. You can install that client, so not the actual engine itself, but the actual client you can install on any machine as long as it matches the same version. And what you would see is, for example, if I had all the computers in here set up on a Lightmass, when it goes to kick off, Lightmass itself, what they call Swarm, is going to go out and figure out how many machines it needs, and it will take all their CPUs. All your CPUs all belong to me. So there you go. So that's the preview build. That's actually really quick, and that's the results that we get. So not bad on preview. A couple of things that I'll point out here, just because I know. So in here, this section here, we have concrete. I'm sure you guys know from just the real world. Concrete's a lovely bounce. So when you put light on it, it reflects it, kind of diffuses it. Personally, for me, from an aesthetic standpoint, that's too dark. That doesn't make sense. I mean, we're kind of sunset, and that just looks way too dark for me. So we'll fix that real quick without having to adjust our light. The next thing here is on preview. I think you guys can see that all right, kind of. If you remember early on when I showed you guys those really nice rich contact shadows, those don't exist in preview because again, that's much more intense computational stuff. But the key that I'm looking for here is just to make sure I don't have any weird artifacts. This is fine. There's maybe not the contact shadow, but there's nothing really weird going on. The last check that I kind of do with this one is to make sure that my shadows aren't too dark and my highlights aren't too bright. So if I'm using kind of as a reference the left side of that face of the building and then kind of the dark areas in between, by looking at those, that's really not bad. It looks a little bit brighter on this screen. I still have some overhead with that light, so I could go in, add more. In fact, actually, that was a pretty quick build anyway. So I'm going to take my directional light, I'm take it up to 7 so you guys can see. We'll just build real fast. But I pretty much know what I'm going to get is blown out values. So I know it's going to be whites are clipped, they're way too high, so I really can't adjust that. You can ignore those. So that was the rocks that are in here. Because I clicked build as opposed to build lighting only, it went through and built AI and the navigation mesh and all that, but because those rocks are not built for that, that's why I threw that. So I'll zoom and let this out. But that's really what I'm looking for when I'm going to build my lighting initially, is to make sure I'm not clipping values. Again, don't want darks too dark and I don't want lights too light. There we go. Okay. So yeah, so in this situation, by going in, it may be a little difficult to see. But if you notice in this area here on the metal and kind of in this area on the concrete, those are blown out values. Those are clipped. So I know it's too bright. That looks bad. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this back to 3. So there you go. That's probably easier to see that way. You can guys see how it kind of gets blown out really quickly. Compresses. So that's what I'm looking for in my initial preview build. It's just to make sure that I have my balanced lighting. Okay, so I'm not going to build it right now because I just returned it back to the regular value. But I do want to address those dark shadows that are down there. Like I said, there's really a couple ways we can address this. I can go into the skylight. I can increase this indirect lighting intensity. So its contribution is now increased. I can go into my directional light. I can do the same thing here, indirect lighting intensity, and bump that guy up. But in this situation, I actually want to contribute both because I want the directionality of the light, but I also want the coloration for my skylight. So to do that, I'm actually going to jump back over into my world settings, and underneath my environment intensity and diffuse boost, I'm going to increase both of those to 3. There's no magic number. Why did I pick 3? That's just a good guess because I built it ahead of time. But I would recommend starting at 3, maybe double that to 6, maybe double it to 10 if you need more. But I'll go ahead and just build lighting only. Again, we're on preview mode, and I'll show you what the difference is on that one. The key points that I think are worth paying attention to are the same that I did when I was looking at my initial kind of scene test. My shadows, my contact shadows, my lights, do I have any of those values clipped or blown out? And we'll wait till that builds, but I'll show you what's really nice about doing it. Non-artists, blown out.
I do, but I understood you, but in case I.
Yeah, it's basically like, so if you were to take a snapshot of this scene and bring it into Photoshop and use a little color picker, you can only get black as 0, white as 255. By clipped values, it means that, so like on that concrete on the side, if I were to take that color picker over it, it would be pure white. That means I've blown it out. I've gone too far to where I can't really bring that down.
There's no dynamic range.
Right. So the ideal situation, and this is why we added that second post-processing volume, is I want those to fall within ranges that they're not clipped, they're not too bright, they're not too dark, because then in post-production or in my post-processing volume, I can then go and increase contrast and push it without blowing out more blown out values, which there is nothing above 1. If that makes sense. Okay, so there's the environment intensity diffuse boost. If you notice, the left side of the concrete stayed the same. It didn't get any brighter. That's exactly what we wanted. We didn't want those clip values. But in the shadowed areas, we got a much, it actually boosted those up. But our contact shadows still stayed dark. Does that make sense? So it's actually just kind of increasing the overall brightness in the environment and the intensity. So this may be a little too much. I don't know. I'll keep it on the demo here. But I may want to just bump those down and maybe say like a value of 2. Well, you know what? Oh, we'll just do that anyways because I want it to look good. Okay, so in this situation, I've done my scene check. I've made sure my values are good. My lighting looks good. Now it's time to do an actual production build. I could go to medium. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and just kick it off to production. And it's going to throw errors at me again. But we'll build it. If you do click build, that's totally fine. What it's doing is actually just going through the whole list that you see there. This guy. So it's going to build reflection captures. It's going to do your pre-computed visibility, build your geometry if you have any. Geometry is the actual Unreal geometry. Build your paths for AI navigation, LODs, and all that. Because we don't really have it, that's why I just go really quick. And then it will build. Show you the difference here too. Open this guy back up. Kind of show you. So our preview build took about, I want to say 12 seconds, 12, 13 seconds to build, but you'll kind of see how production goes. If this scene was much, much heavier, a lot more geometry, you had way more light maps, this process can take a while. Yes?
If you go back to the other scene, the main scene,
Yeah.
so we can see it. Just so I understand why would you not add, in order to lighten this up, but only this, why would you just not add another light down?
So you could. That's absolutely acceptable. I'll give you 2 situations in which one would be acceptable to use and the second wouldn't be. One to be acceptable would be, let's say for example that with this particular product that we're building, we're doing like a house walkthrough, right? Like it's to showcase a building. And I find that, you know, my global light that's coming in, everything's perfect. Like everything looks perfect except this one little area. In that situation, you're doing a targeted point light to help boost it. That would make sense because then you can kind of blend it between. The flip side of that, what gets dangerous with that is that obviously the more lights you start placing in the scene, the more you're now having to figure out what's causing what, why is it causing it. So, you know, so if you start increasing your overall intensity, let's say for example, you know, we've got the sunset scene. Let's say I create a whole another lighting scenario in which it's nighttime. And I switch that over, but that light's been, the light that we're talking about placing in there has been set in to compensate for my daylight. I go nighttime, it's like, you know, holy shit, who left the lights on? You know, like that's a situation where you have to go in and adjust that. It's kind of the same principle as your reflection captures. Is it safe to do? Yeah, absolutely, you can add it. It's really just on a case-by-case basis and asking the question, do I really need that? Can I get away with something else? You know, I will say that adding the light, I could do a case for it in this situation. Let's say, you know, I've bumped up my environment intensity like I did here. And everywhere else, it's like, I really don't like this. It works better at one, but I still have a super dark area. Yeah, absolutely, just go and throw another light in there. And that's totally acceptable.
So try to use the global settings.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to the comment I made earlier too, where in Unreal, you can only have a maximum of 4 overlapping lights. In fact, actually, if you go under, I want to say it's, I'm going blank on it. There is, no. Yeah, typically what happens is when you're in game mode, I won't add it right now since it's building, but if you had a point light and you put 4 of those together, like just kind of side by side, you'll eventually see, usually the point in the middle will have a red X over it. That red X means it's not disabled. It means that lighting information is not going to be computed in your dynamic lights. Again, if you set your lights to static, and this is where there's, it becomes, lighting artists is that combination. So the 3 settings, movable and stationary, static is purely baked lighting. So, you know, if you really wanted to, say for example, a situation by adding that one light, I don't want to add it in my overhead cost, but I want it to look nice in my renders. Set it to static. Render it out. It will bake in that lighting information, and it won't cast dynamic. However, if your light is set to stationary or movable, it is casting dynamic light, and that's where you can only have 4 overlapping. And I will tell you that from past experience too, that does become really challenging. Okay, really challenging because there's some situations where you want dynamic lights, but because you can only have 4 and you're trying to increase spheres, as soon as those spheres touch, now you're out. Yep. And I think there is. Let me see. That's detail lighting. Yeah. So you can go in here as well. Visibility or optimization view modes and light complexity, and that's where obviously this seems really simple. So there's not. But if you have a bunch of overlapping lights, that blue will turn to white, which turns to green, which turns to red, or green, white, red. I think is the gradient. Wherever it gets red, you've obviously got too many lights in there, and then it gets expensive. I'm sure you guys have played games before where there's just random areas that you start walking through, and you're like, why am I dropping frame rates or something? Again, it can be a host of things, but a lot of times that's light, because it's now trying to compute, like, now I'm casting 4 dynamic shadows to the player, just 1, and I think it's expensive. Okay.
Lighting issues have been adding those static lights in there so that they can, that's why it's like, okay, I have a bunch of lights.
Yeah.
So
And from an artistic standpoint, kind of what you do as a lighting artist is you really try to push your lights as far as you can before you have to add another one.
Right.
Because again, then it becomes a juggling act. Is this one adding, well, this one's adding yellow, but I'm combating with the blue to add it red, which then, Okay, so yay. So obviously a little bit longer. If I actually go to the log on this one, we can see. So total time to build was 6 minutes and 3 seconds. So not bad, but obviously a big difference from our quick preview of like 14 seconds. Okay, so I'll do this so it's easy to see. So what do you get by going from preview to production? A lot actually, but it's very subtle, but I'll kind of show you here. So our contact shadows in this area, do you see those really nice kind of soft shadows below the stairs? So there's one area. If we go up into here as well, like the chairs, I'll actually come back to this and explain why it's a little bit pixelated here, but maybe a little difficult to see, but there's actually a much richer contact shadow here that fades out as it goes in. We don't get that in preview. Going back to this area, so now, man, that is.
On this number, but I do see the difference right next to it.
Let me see real quick.
Yeah.
I get it to match a little bit. But now we get, oh God, this is projector. We get a really nice rich contact shadow here. So it is black as black can get in this area, and then fades out appropriately over the distance. Same thing here. Actually, I'll show you another little area. I know I see this one up front, but this is a really good example. So what's unique about this little area is we're kind of in a bowl here, but it's still kind of exposed to our directional light. So we've got a lot of ambient light coming, which is going to give us those soft shadows. However, that cube semi-floating overneath still produces a contact shadow. In preview mode, that contact shadow is just kind of blurry. But by going into production mode, we not only get that semi-close contact shadow, we get the feathered effect, and we also get the contribution from the sides. So yeah, so the big takeaway with this one in production is, I think you guys can see now that most of these things that we've seen, we saw in preview. There wasn't a need to do a production run to then go back to preview. Most of the things we could catch, again, catching our highlights or shadows and all that, easy to find, and then of course running production. I will tell you, I've worked on some projects where production build actually took about 7 hours. And that was on a 40 core system. So use production only as your last resort when it's ready to go for production, because it sucks having to rebuild. Okay, so the last bit I was going to show real quick, as kind of mentioned this one, is you may find at times, like for example, this actually comes out really nice, this deck, but kind of close to down here, we're getting a little bit of artifacting. That's your UV light maps. Like I said, this wasn't really about creating content. This was more just about assembly. However, there is one change that you can do on your end if you're finding that, for example, when you go to render those and it's really splotchy, it's because of your light map UVs. So I think we actually covered this last year, but there's two UV channels that come in. For those of you who aren't familiar with UVs, UVs are what you, they're basically, if you were to take an orange, cut it, peel it off, lay it flat, and then paint on it, and then rewrap it back around, those are UVs. It's texture coordinates for the actual system. So when we apply, this particular texture, so if I go into here, so we've got a flat 2D texture. There has to be coordinate information for it, and that's what these UVs are. So these are horrible UVs. I can't believe I figured them. Anyways, what they correlate is just, it's like a flat sheet. It's that orange peel. There is, however, a second set of UVs. It's your UV channel 1. These are your light map UVs. These are the coordinates for processing textured data. Let me see if I can actually pull one up real quick for you guys. Okay. That's a light map. It's actually kind of a combination of several. What you're seeing is an overlay. For example, that's shadow information, lighting shadow information. So when we bake our lights, it creates this new texture. And this is what is applied to our objects on those light map UVs. So obviously with this one, if we're getting that pixelation, it means we don't have enough resolution. So to fix that, in your actual asset, so again, I'll open this guy. It's this guy here. So inside of it, and I'll keep my UV channels on, you can scroll down under here, light map resolution, and you can bump this up. It doesn't have to be in powers of 2. I'd recommend it. The reason why is because it takes all of those objects and then it packs it into a single map. So your map size, your light map will say like instead of like, I think 2K by default. So we'll find everything in the world that can and will fit in a 2K, and we'll place those in there. So if this guy's 512 and another one's 256, this will always get twice the texture resolution as the other. Does that make sense? Okay. But if you find that you don't have enough, just simply go in here, and you can take like 1024. It probably won't do anything right now. Yeah.
You'd have to rerun.
You have to rebuild.
No, you don't have to rebuild because it should. Let me take it down to like.
The UVs that we're seeing here on this particular object, that's just representative, and then it's going to pack it tighter in the final build.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why this one's not. I don't know why it's. Anyways. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure why this is, but typically this could just be kind of weird. But under your general settings, if you change the light map resolution, you'll see it reprocess those. And typically, as you get smaller, the padding between those gets bigger, so it can bleed. As you get bigger, it'll get more compact. But by simply just increasing this light map resolution, it will increase it for that. Let me see real quick if it should be doing it. But if I go into
Actually, it's at the moment, look at the view, that you've lost a good chunk of detail in the light map.
that's because I pressed it. The light information is still there, but because I tweaked it, it's now going away. But that's what I want to show you real quick. So show you that it's actually taking effect. So if I go to optimization view mode, light map densities, and then I come back into here, kind of just make this over. So if I take this up to like 1024, say 2048, and then 4096.
It's just showing you way the red is saying way too much detail.
Yep. Yeah, typically with your light map stuff, so you can see everything has light map UVs because it has to when you bake your lighting. You want to keep this in the blue range. Like I said too, it's an arbitrary value, so you don't have to have it in a power of 2, i.e. 64, 128, 256, 512. Because again, what you had asked the question on, what it does is everything is relative. So it takes that whole scene and it looks at those UVs and packs what it can into one 2K map. Then it moves on, makes another 2K map. When it comes to packaging on Unreal, I won't say that this is necessarily inherent to Unreal. Other engines do it too. This is your most expensive cost when it comes to a package build, is your light maps. Because you can see, even with this one, a small scene, we have 4 2K, or actually this one's 1024, but we've got 4 1K maps just for our light maps. So obviously, if we start increasing the light map density, it's going to need to create more of the light maps to combat that. Does that make sense? Okay. But yeah, of course, because we changed the light map resolution on here, you're absolutely right. Now we have to rebuild light. So, okay. Well, that actually kind of wraps this up. All that kind of makes sense with lighting. Okay. Cool. Again, very simplistic. Absolutely used for games. In fact, if this scene, if we were running around, if I had the player, in fact, I don't know if I actually have the player on here. Nope. No, it's because it's this actual product was built for iOS. It was kind of an interactive touchscreen. But if I were to jump in there, you'd actually see that when I go in the shadows, I shadow. So totally applicable to a game if you were building one on that one. Question time. Yes.
Did you let the interior?
No. Actually, that's all kind of pre-baked. That's actually in a texture. If I fly in there.
You saw that earlier when he had a light
Yeah.
lighting.
If I go in lit mode, this was a fancy little trick they did. Because it was an iOS, again, I pilfered this project from Epic. Because it was an iOS, they had like this much budget for polygons. So most of it was just outside, so all they did is just simply a cube reprojection on the inside to make it kind of look fake. Fun little trick.
Is there anything you do differently for lighting interiors?
Yes and no. So if we were doing interiors on this one, one other thing that I would add to this is underneath over here, you type in light mass. There's a light mass portal. And what a light mass portal is kind of a representation of your window. So you'd want to add a light mass portal to wherever you want light to come in from the outside. Otherwise, it's going to assume when it hits that geometry, it blocks it into the shadow. So you'd want to add light mass portals where it makes sense. In this case, we'd add them to all of our windows. So when we process the outside lighting, it then processes inside. Now this goes into the dialogue we were having about adding additional lights. Now this is a situation where you absolutely need to go in and start adding interior lights. So my recommendation would be, this particular building is set up really nice. Do this because it's all a bunch of squares. Create a new post-processing volume for your interior. So for example, if, let me see, I'll go in here. Actually, we'll go down here. Okay, so I'm gonna add another post-processing volume. And I'm just gonna move them in. Relative.
I'm so curious what your mobile viewport setup looks like. What you use on a daily basis.
Me?
Yeah.
3 monitors. And literally this entire middle window is what I have on my primary. I've got World Outliner, my details, my layers all on this side. And then I've got my content, like my actual content browser, and everything on this side. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm simply just adding post-processing volume in there. So this will go back to what I was talking about. So to find out if it's actually working, right? So I'll do this post-processing volume, and I'll just call this INT for interior. So if I go inside of it, okay, and all I'm going to do here is, let's just say bump up my gamma so it's brighter. I mean, immediately we can already see that it does take effect. If you remember what I was saying too, I haven't changed the priority sorting over it, but because it's smaller than the one outside of it, it takes priority. So as I go in, it changes. So I actually did a pretty damn good job on lining that up with the window. We're just guessing. So that would be my first process, is getting that post-processing volume. Same principles apply as the exterior. Make sure it's balanced first before adding any kind of special effects. So in this situation, all I did was just do a gamma boost. That's all it was. You could do some other things as well with it. Like you could set, this would be the other thing I would do, your exposure, min brightness, max brightness. Probably not as broad. Obviously 0.03 and 2 is broad. I'd bring them down a little bit more, maybe like 0.5 and 1.5. And then what you're going to get with that is anytime that you like look at super, super dark stuff, it will slightly increase the player's thing. Or if it's too light, make it a little bit darker. That helps out. So, you know, I'm sure everybody's played a game where you're like, it's really dark and you don't have a flashlight. You're like, this really sucks. So that's one way to do it. So, and then really the last thing is by adding just additional lights inside where you'd want them. Now, granted, if we added like, I wouldn't want to add a directional light inside, because directional light is like the sun infinite coming. However, what I could do is just go in here, create just, you know, some different point lights where it makes sense. Obviously, this is like a lamp. Take the radius down. We'll go up here. Quickly do like a color selection. If you notice that it's not really doing anything right now, it's because my point light, I could set it to movable just to see like real-time lighting. Of course, it's using pre-baked. I think, if I'm not mistaken too, this texture, this is probably a bad example, this texture inside of there, I think it's a pre-baked and it doesn't actually accept lighting. But I'll show you real quick just by adding like a, I'll add just a sphere in here. You can kind of see what's happening. So there's my point light. You see how it's adding light to it. So you can go in and add lights on the interior. Same principles. Make sure it's not, you know, super high radius. I won't go into like doing like the source length, temperature, and all that one. We can do that later. But basically, just add some lights on the inside. Same thing. You can bake them out, set them to static, stationary, whatever you want. Is totally fine. One note that I think is very interesting. You guys might not know this, but a point light is actually 6 spotlights. In Unreal, the way that has been coded is 6 spotlights. 1 up, 1 down, 1 side, 1 front, 1 back. So point lights are really expensive in retrospect. So my recommendation is just add spotlights where needed. Lazy programming.
Point lights cheaper.
Point lights in traditional sense, yes, but a point light in Unreal is 6 spotlights.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, it's 6 spotlights with all their cones set at 180. Oh, you know what? Let me show you too. I had forgotten about this. If you go into Visualize and Volumetric Light Map, this is what I was talking about. All those little spheres. So if I go outside here, it'd be a little difficult to see. Let me see if I can find one close. But all of those have, yeah, that just looks like black, doesn't it? Maybe that's a little bit easier to see that one. But all those little balls are little bits of lighting information. That's the volumetric lighting. So as I pass something, so for example, if I take, turn it off, and I take like that same, let's say a sphere, even though I don't have any real dynamic lighting, as I move this sphere throughout the scene, it's actually picking up that lighting information. So same thing with your main character. As he goes through the scene, he's going to pick up all that volumetric light information. Unity doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Cool. What else? Any other questions? Okay. Cool. Everybody's like, wait. That's it. So that pretty much covers.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah.
Having nothing to do with this scene. How come in all the Unreal games I ever come across, they have nothing like this in the lighting, even though the engine's perfectly capable
Whew.
That's not a question that really is something you probably can answer. It just.
There's two ways I've seen it. One thing that I've seen a lot is just traditionalism. People lighting the scene as if they would in like a traditional 3D package. Putting specific lights everywhere because they want that fine-grained control. I think that could also be summarized as just not understanding the tools.
Some of that, yeah, because older you would have to make in that light.
Yeah.
Not used to light in real time.
Volumetric light mapping actually came out in 4.17. I think was a preview build, and then a 4.18 was the default method. So prior to that, in fact, actually, we're working on a project right now. We're finalizing for another studio, and they built it in 4.14. So you've got some studios to start a project. If you think about a traditional 3-year cycle, that they start a project, what was the engine 3 years ago? So,
Okay.
yeah. The other thing too, which is another point to bring up with it, in answer to that one, is Unreal is very, very deep. I mean, you can produce a fairly good quality product out of the gate without knowing a ton, but you can dive really, really deep and do some incredible things with this. I mean, you think about coupling post-processing volumes with reflection captures, with specific captured cube maps and individual lighting, you can produce some really cool effects. But again, there's artistry in that. Suck that AI. Cool. Yeah, and with this whole scene, even though, so I don't have lighting, let me just do it again, I'll do medium. But after lighting's built and packaged, yeah, this particular scene right here runs at about 290 frames a second on a 1060. So there's no excuse why your scene should be beautiful looking. Cool, okay. Well, if there's no more questions, that's pretty much it for the demo and everything. We still have, what do we have? About 30 minutes if you guys want to chat about anything, questions about anything. Feel free. So yeah, so starting next week is when we're actually doing our dive into the whole, oh, you guys missed this one, I think. So for this coming year, I know one of the things that was big on the survey we sent out is people kind of wanted to see like a project from start to finish. So this is probably going to tank. I'll build it up anyways. Fingers crossed. We're actually going to build this together. So from start to finish, it's got kind of a 360 camera. You can manipulate. You can change the whole look of it. You can set it in motion, small little animation. Prefix cameras, and then also run to a full cinematic. So that's going to be, I think, a 5-part series, I think, over the next 5 meetups, and we'll go through all the aspects of this. So yeah, so if you guys have laptops or things you want to bring, feel free to. This is going to be a walkthrough. Hopefully I'll get everything squeezed in there in time. We'll do that. And we're also, in case you missed, we're actually live streaming right now, which is kind of cool. So in the event you guys can't make it, it's all going to be recorded. It'll be thrown up on our YouTube. You know what to do. If you like, a thumbs up. If you didn't, like down. Go ahead and subscribe. No, please don't do that. But we will post it on there for everybody so you guys can kind of review it at your own pace if you got like a machine at home. So.
Do you mind pulling up that month by month breakdown again from the PowerPoint?
This guy?
Yeah, add some friends that can make tonight.
Cool.
And I'll post that on the Unreal Twitter too, so.
Yeah. I would say that's probably the biggest thing. If you guys are on Discord, that's okay. I mean, it'd be nice to get on it. Yeah, we'll post things on Twitter. I will say with Discord, especially as we're going through this, more than likely when you guys go back and start setting up, you'll probably have questions. Jump on Discord. That's where the whole meetup is. We've got our stuff on there. It's the easiest way to answer questions, screen share, and show everything. Cool. Let's see.
I would like to give you kudos for those we were just discussing, how come most games don't look like that? The fact that you have that knowledge that you can make something that quickly does show the artistry that you already have.
Well, this won't sound, for fear of sounding like I'm tooting my own horn here, that's actually my primary reason why I took the reins with the Unreal Meetup, was to be able to pass some of that knowledge on. I know you guys probably know this too, in particular with like Kansas City, but for the longest time we have been synonymous with the hobbyist. You know, where people don't really take it seriously, you know, we are flyover country. And I think that that's, for lack of better terms, bullshit. We've got good talent here. I think, if anything, it's just more lacking the knowledge of the tools and really how to use them. And so, you know, you guys know I've got my studio, and we're, you know, not all over hot stuff. I mean, we are nationally known. We are working on stuff, you know, nationwide. And that's a big thing for us, is showing the viability, we can do this, you know, with more than hobbyists and stuff. And so, so to that effect, I was just saying, for fear of sounding like I'm tooting my own horn, that's what I want to pass along. And that's why I think that goes back, especially for this year. If there was one goal that I had to bring to the meetup, was empowering you guys to be able to produce things. And that's even my encouragement too, is that whatever your ideas are, even if they're small, you think they're stupid, whatever, is actually producing things and going, you know, hey, I made this, you know, and just kind of building everything up. Yes?
Have you ever known of anyone who's hired as a lighting designer for a game? This is its own discipline, is something you've ever...
Yeah. You'll find that the bigger you get in the company, the more granular they get. I would say that on team sizes of 25 plus, you'll typically find a dedicated lighting person. Again, that's a general statement. I would say in a team smaller than 25, typically your lighting artist will also be your level designer, somebody who's doing the assembly. Yeah, you can probably speak to that one too.
Yeah, we had a team of 5 people making a game this past year, and if it was anything artistic, it was me and another guy.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't coding, it was me. So that was fun, stressful, fun.
Yeah. But yeah, you can find dedicated stuff, but you know, yeah, I'll save it that. I really like to go way deep into career paths. Cool. All right, awesome. There's no official like break. We're good. Oh, I didn't have a raffle today. That's my fault.
Raffle is the free desert stylized environment.
Yeah.
Free until February 1.
Yep. Totally. Cool.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.